This is a drone's eye view of the Heybridge Lock near the top of the River Blackwater in Essex, England. It shows the approaches to the lock at low water, and as you can probably see, not much can get in right now. You might be able to paddle a canoe up to the lock gates, but I wouldn't bank on that either. This drone footage was taken earlier on in the year, but the river and the lock don't change, or at least not much, so I'm using this as it's such a nice shot. The mud around this part of the river is quite extensive and home to many water birds and animals. The mud is quite soft, but with care you can walk on it, as you can see by the many tracks made by someone walking around, probably in wellies. But it is a bit of an art to do this, and not for the faint-hearted. The River Blackwater runs in front of the lock entrance, up to Hillypool Point, where it turns through about 90 degrees and then heads off down towards Osey Island. Having reached Osey Island, it then swings round and disappears behind Osey Island. And just in case you hadn't realised, that green blob on the horizon is Osey Island. I had signed up for a cruising company trip from West Mersea to Heybridge Basin, and the intention was for the participating boats to sail up to the lock for around 12:15 on the Saturday, lock into the basin and spend a day there, before locking out on the Sunday for a sail home. The forecast winds for Friday afternoon were from west, force 3 gusting 5, and from the evening west, force 2 gusting 3. For Saturday, in the early morning, the winds were forecast to be west, force 1 gusting 3, late morning from the south, force 2 gusting 3, and in the afternoon from the south, force 3 gusting 4. The forecast for Sunday was for stronger winds. From south of west, force 4 gusting 5 throughout the day, although the winds could bait a little during the afternoon. It was going to be an interesting sail home. Plan A was to leave the mooring on the Friday afternoon and sail out to Big Fleet Creek to anchor for the night. I didn't intend to put Naiad on the mud this trip, since I wanted to set off as soon as the tide started to flood at 7:30 a.m. on the Saturday morning. If I were on the mud, I would have to wait until Naiad floated before being able to set off, and as the forecast winds were fairly light, I didn't want to waste any time. Having set off with the flood tide, I would make my way up to Heybridge Lock, hopefully arriving just before the lock was due to start opening at 12:15. Hopefully, the return journey would be plain sailing, if you'll pardon the intended pun. The winds, although strong, would be from behind the boat, and that would negate some of the force in the wind and make it feel a little less strong. The tides are very high this weekend, so I intended to cut to the north of Osey Island, both to avoid the remainder of the flood tide and to shorten the journey. I deliberately set out on the Friday afternoon quite early, since I wanted to sail Naiad in the strong wind and tide conditions, to see how she handled it. As you can see from the track of my actual voyage, I spent a lot of time making good progress against the tide on one tack, only to lose it all again on the other, and sometimes I lost a lot more than I gained. I tried all the sail combinations I had, 2 reefs, 1 reef, full sail, 1, 2 and no headsails, but none of these made a great deal of difference. What made Naiad so bad on one tack compared to the other was the direction she was making to the waves. With the waves from the side or from behind, she made good progress. Otherwise, she did not. Once I figured this out, I sailed across to the more sheltered side of the river and immediately started to make progress on both tacks. This is my overnight stop on the River Blackwater, which is quite nice. There's the towers of the Bradwell power station, now disused. That's the old nuclear power station. And I think you can just about see the lights over there. I think that is Bradwell Marina. so I can get a better view. So that's looking further up the River Blackwater, and hopefully over on this side, over there somewhere, is Big Fleet Creek. I'm not entirely sure because it was dark when I got here, but somewhere over there there's a creek, and if time allows and the wind doesn't get up too much, I'll try flying a drone over there and see what it's like, but we'll have to wait and see about that. It's a bit lighter now. As you can see, the sun is just starting to rise over there on the horizon. Very nice, very picturesque. There's a little bit of a breeze blowing, which is good because I need to get going. But that over there, you can see, is not the creek I was aiming for. The creek I was aiming for is in fact over there. I don't know whether you can see it. We're probably 200 yards away from it, so that wasn't bad considering it was dark. It's almost low water, just waiting for the tide to change, and then I will get going. It looks like it's going to be a very leisurely sail at the moment anyway, up to Heybridge, and after the exertions of yesterday afternoon, which was quite lumpy and quite windy, a pleasant sail will be very much appreciated. 7:30, tide has turned, breeze is very, very light, and we're away. Didn't get time to send up a drone, unfortunately, but I'm hoping that I'll be able to get close enough just to show the creek that I was aiming for yesterday. You can see Tollsbury over in the distance there, and the mud that is closest to the water in fact is a sort of a mud bank, an obstruction, and the creek lies just beyond. The entrance of the creek is just over there, where you see the trees disappear behind the mud or the sea wall. That's where the entrance to the creek is. So hopefully I'll be able to get a little bit closer and get a better shot. We'll see. I decided to have a go at the sheet to tiller self-steering arrangement, and I've got it temporarily set up here. As you can see, I've got a series of bungees down here. I've got some extra ones just in case the wind is very strong. Because my cockpit's fairly narrow, these stretch all the way across and then go through a block and are tied onto the tiller with a rolling hitch there, a slip rolling hitch, so it's easy to adjust. And then that line basically just goes up to the end of the boom. Quite easy. Once you've got it the thing set up, you use the slip knot there to adjust the angle that you want, and at the moment she's doing pretty well. I've been going for I don't know, 5-10 minutes I suppose, and she seems to be working quite nicely, going in the right direction. And if I come back here, you can actually see the tiller moving backwards and forwards in response to the... Oh, let me just get back a bit here. The tiller moves backwards and forwards in response to wind changes. But there is also a little bit of motion in the tiller just from the water passing over the blade of the rudder, I think. Nevertheless, it seems to be working quite nicely, and if we go down and have a look at this pulley, you can see the line running through. That's the bungee line, keeping things nice and taut. This is the track that we made on the return trip. It was fantastic sailing. I put 2 reefs in the main before even locking out, as we could hear the wind howling through the trees and through the rigging. And as soon as I was out of the lock, thanks to a short tow from another boat with an engine, I was off sailing. It was about an hour before high water, and as I planned, I went to the north of Ozzy Island. It was a glorious sail home. I didn't take any photographs or videos on the way home, but some of the other boats did. As you can see here, Naiad is actually quite small compared to the other three boats that you can see in the photograph. We just rounded Hillypool Point and were heading down towards Ozzy Island. Here's another view of Naiad as we sail along. I was thoroughly enjoying myself at this point. It was very comfortable sailing despite the strong winds, and although the tide was against us at this moment in time, it wouldn't stay that way for very long. As I mentioned before, it was a glorious sail. I had a great time. All in all, a thoroughly enjoyable weekend.